boy lived in a small, old house on the edge of town. The walls were cracked, and the paint was peeling, but he loved it because it was home. His clothes were always a little worn, and he sometimes went to school without breakfast. People often judged him by the way he looked. Some students at school would whisper and point when he walked by, and it made him feel small. But there was something special about him that nobody could see at first glance. He had a gift for music. Ever since he was very young, he had been drawn to the sound of the piano. There was an old keyboard in a corner of the room, a hand-me-down that barely worked. Some keys were sticky, some made a strange buzzing sound, but he loved it anyway. Every day he would sit there for hours, practicing and creating melodies. The music was his escape from the world that didn't understand him. It was his way of expressing feelings he couldn't put into words. He didn't have fancy lessons or a teacher who pushed him. All he had were his ears and his heart. He listened carefully to songs on the radio and tried to play them by ear. Sometimes he would close his eyes and imagine himself on a big stage, the audience watching and listening to him play. In those moments, the outside world didn't matter. His worn shoes, his torn shirt, the laughter of other kids. All of it disappeared when his fingers touched the keys. At school, the boy was quiet and polite. He didn't bother anyone, and he didn't ask for much. Most of the time, he sat alone during lunch, sketching little musical notes in his notebook. Teachers noticed that he was smart and attentive, but no one really knew about his talent. The other students thought he was just another poor kid with no special skills. They didn't realize that inside him, a storm of music was waiting to burst out. Even though life was hard, he found joy in small things. He loved listening to birds in the morning, feeling the sunlight on his face, and imagining new songs. Music was everywhere for him. Sometimes he would hum while walking to school or tap rhythms on his desk. It didn't matter if anyone was listening. The boy knew that one day he would show the world what he could do. One afternoon, he was walking home from school when he passed by the local community center. A poster on the wall caught his eye. It was about a talent competition for young performers. The winner would get a small prize, but more importantly, a chance to perform on a real stage in front of an audience. His heart raced. He had never thought about performing in front of strangers. What if they laughed at him? But the idea of playing on a real piano on a real stage made him feel alive. He could hear the music in his head already, and it felt powerful. At home, he stared at his old keyboard. He could almost hear it calling to him, saying that this was his chance. He spent hours practicing that evening, trying to perfect a song he had been working on for months. The music flowed naturally from him, like a river that couldn't be stopped. For the first time, he imagined people not laughing but listening, really listening to his music. The thought made him both nervous and excited. The boy's family noticed how focused he had become. His younger sibling peeked into the room and smiled. "You sound amazing," they said. It was the first time he had been told this in words, and it warmed his heart. Encouragement from someone he cared about gave him a little more courage. He realized that maybe, just maybe, he could try to perform. The days leading up to the competition were filled with quiet preparation. He practiced morning and night, making sure every note was perfect. He imagined the audience, the stage lights, and the feeling of the piano under his fingers. The nervousness never went away completely, but it became part of the excitement. He knew that the music was bigger than his fear. On the morning of the competition, he put on his best clothes. They were still simple, nothing fancy, but they were clean and neat. As he walked to the community center, he could hear whispers from other kids and some parents. They laughed softly when they saw him. The boy kept his head down but felt a fire inside him. He was determined to show that his music mattered, no matter what anyone thought. Backstage, the other performers were practicing and chatting. Some had flashy costumes and instruments, showing off their confidence. The boy stayed quiet, feeling out of place. He held his music notebook tightly, flipping through the pages one last time. He reminded himself that this was his moment, and the music would speak for him. When it was finally his turn, he walked onto the stage. The audience saw a poor-looking boy, small and nervous. Some people chuckled, thinking this would be an easy laugh. But the boy didn't see the laughter. He only saw the piano waiting for him. He sat down, took a deep breath, and placed his fingers on the keys. The room was silent, and in that quiet, the first notes began to flow. As he played, the audience started to listen. The music was soft at first, delicate, and full of emotion. His fingers moved across the keys with a grace that seemed impossible for someone his age and experience. Every note carried a story of struggle, hope, and dreams. Slowly, the laughter faded, replaced by curiosity and wonder. People leaned forward, trying to understand the depth of what they were hearing. The boy's heart was pounding, but he didn't falter. He lost himself in the music, forgetting the audience entirely. The melodies told his story without a single word. Each chord was a reflection of his life. The hardships, the lonely afternoons at home, the moments of pure joy when music filled his soul. The audience began to feel the emotion in the room, connecting with him through the sound alone. By the time he finished the piece, there was a moment of silence. Nobody moved or spoke, as if they couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. Then, slowly, the applause began. It grew louder and louder, filling the room with a thunderous cheer. The boy looked up, finally noticing the amazed faces of the audience. Their earlier laughter had disappeared completely. He smiled softly, feeling a mix of relief, pride, and pure happiness. That day, the boy learned that his music could touch people's hearts. He realized that no matter how poor or overlooked he might seem, his talent and passion were powerful enough to change how others saw him. The experience gave him confidence, and he knew this was just the beginning of his journey. The boy walked home that evening with a sense of accomplishment that no hardship could take away. Music was no longer just his escape. It was his voice, and he was ready to let the world hear it. After the performance, the boy could not stop thinking about the stage. Every time he closed his eyes, he could see the lights, hear the applause, and feel the keys beneath his fingers. For the first time, he realized that music could take him beyond the small streets and cramped rooms he had always known. It was more than a hobby now. It was a chance to be seen and heard by the world. The next morning, he woke up early, still carrying the excitement from the day before. His family had noticed a change in him. He smiled more, his shoulders seemed less heavy, and there was a light in his eyes that had not been there before. He sat by the old keyboard, gently pressing the keys and remembering the feel of the real piano on the stage. He tried to recreate some of the sounds he had made, but he knew it was different. That day had shown him what music could really be, and he wanted more. Word of his performance spread quickly in the small town. Teachers at school whispered about the boy who had stunned the audience. Some students who had once laughed now looked at him with surprise, unsure of what to say. People began to notice that there was more to him than they had assumed. Some even came to the community center just to hear him play again. The boy felt nervous at first, but he also felt proud that his music was making a difference. One afternoon, a kind music teacher approached him. She had heard about his performance and wanted to help him improve. She invited him to a small music club where young talents gathered to learn and practice. The boy hesitated for a moment, thinking about his worn clothes and simple life, but the teacher smiled and said, "Your music is what matters, not how you look." Her words gave him courage. He decided to go. At the music club, he met other kids who played different instruments. Some were confident, some were shy like him. He listened carefully and watched as they practiced. The boy realized that everyone had their own journey, and it was okay to be different. He started practicing with more focus than ever, learning new techniques and understanding the music in deeper ways. The teacher guided him gently, correcting mistakes and praising his efforts. Each lesson made him feel more confident and capable. Back at home, the boy's life was still simple. He still walked the same streets and returned to the same old house. But inside, he felt a world opening up. He spent hours writing new melodies, some soft and gentle, others strong and lively. He experimented with rhythms and sounds, learning to express every feeling through music. He found that when he played, his worries and fears faded away. Music became his voice, his friend, and his way of dreaming bigger than he had ever imagined. School was still a challenge. Some students continued to whisper or stare, but the boy no longer let it bother him. He focused on what mattered most, the music. His teachers noticed a change too. They saw how disciplined and dedicated he was. Slowly, they began to support him more openly, giving him chances to play during school events and encouraging him to enter more competitions. The boy was cautious but excited. Every opportunity felt like another step toward something greater. One day, a small competition was announced in a nearby town. It was not a big event, but it offered a chance to perform in front of a larger audience. The boy's teacher encouraged him to enter. At first, he hesitated. He remembered the nervousness and fear from his first stage performance. But then he thought about the feeling of playing music that moved people, of seeing faces light up with surprise and joy. He decided to try. He practiced day and night for the upcoming performance. The old keyboard at home became his training ground. He perfected every note, every pause, every expression in the music. Sometimes he played softly, imagining a calm audience, and sometimes he played loudly, imagining a cheering crowd. He even wrote a new piece, inspired by the streets he walked every day, the people he saw, and the dreams he held inside. It was a story told through music, a story only he could share. When the day of the competition arrived, he felt a mix of excitement and fear. The bus ride to the town was long, and he watched the passing scenery quietly. His family wished him luck, smiling but worried. They knew how important this moment was, but they also knew that life could be hard. The boy held his notebook and closed his eyes, imagining himself on the stage, imagining the music flowing effortlessly. Backstage, other contestants were warming up. Some were older, some had fancy instruments, and some were dressed in bright, stylish clothes. The boy felt a small pang of doubt. Did he really belong here? But then he remembered the first stage, the applause, and the way music had made him feel alive. He took a deep breath and reminded himself that his talent was what mattered most. When it was finally his turn, he walked onto the stage with quiet confidence. The lights were bright, and the audience looked expectant. Some whispered among themselves, noticing the boy's simple clothes and humble appearance. He did not let it bother him. He sat at the piano, felt the keys under his fingers, and let the music take over. The first notes were soft, gentle, and full of emotion. The audience leaned forward, surprised by the depth and skill of his playing. As he continued, the music grew more complex and beautiful. Each note carried a story. Each chord expressed a feeling. The audience was captivated. The boy was no longer just a poor kid from a small house. He was a storyteller, a messenger, and a musician who could touch hearts. People who had doubted him now watched in amazement. Some closed their eyes, feeling the music deep inside, while others whispered to each other in disbelief. The boy's nerves disappeared, replaced by a sense of joy and freedom. When the final note echoed through the hall, there was a moment of silence. Then the applause erupted, louder and more powerful than anything he had heard before. People stood up, clapping and cheering. The boy smiled, feeling a warmth in his heart that no words could describe. He had done it again. He had shared his music, and it had reached people in a way he had never imagined. That day, he learned that talent combined with dedication and courage could break through every barrier. After the performance, the boy was approached by a few kind strangers who wanted to help him. Some offered music books, others offered lessons, and one person even spoke about a small scholarship to attend a better music school. The boy felt grateful but stayed humble. He knew that all of this was a step, not the end. He had discovered that the world was bigger than he had ever known, and music could be his way to explore it. Walking home that evening, he felt a sense of hope and purpose. The streets were the same, the house was the same, but he had changed. Music had given him a voice, a path, and a way to dream. The boy knew that challenges would still come, that some people would still judge him, but he also knew that his heart and his music were strong enough to face them. He looked forward to the future with courage, ready to play, ready to inspire, and ready to show the world that talent and passion could shine no matter where you come from. The boy had become more confident in his music, but he also felt a new kind of pressure. After his second performance, people started expecting him to play perfectly every time. He liked the attention and the praise, but it also made him nervous. He wanted to live up to everyone's expectations, but sometimes he wondered if he could. Even so, he continued practicing every day, determined to improve. The piano was no longer just a hobby. It had become his life. One morning, he received a letter at home. It was an invitation to participate in a larger competition in a nearby city. The competition would have many talented players from different towns, and the winner would get a chance to perform on a famous stage in the city. The boy's heart raced as he read the letter. This was the opportunity he had dreamed about, but it also scared him. He was still the same poor kid from a small house, and now he would be in front of so many people who had no idea who he was. His family was proud but also worried. They knew the city was far, and the boy would have to travel and stay away from home for a while. But they also knew how much this meant to him. They encouraged him, helping him pack his things and reminding him to focus on the music. The boy thanked them quietly, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. He promised himself that he would give everything he had when he got on that stage. The days leading up to the competition were filled with intense practice. The boy spent hours at the music club, learning new techniques from his teacher. He also practiced on his old keyboard at home, trying to make every note perfect. Sometimes he made mistakes and felt frustrated, but he never gave up. He knew that hard work and patience were the keys to success. He imagined himself performing in the big city, and the thought kept him motivated. Finally, the day came for the trip to the city. The boy had never been to such a big place before. The streets were crowded, the buildings were tall, and everything felt overwhelming. He held his music notebook tightly, trying to stay calm. His teacher and a few kind volunteers accompanied him, helping him navigate the busy streets and the competition hall. Even though he felt nervous, he reminded himself of the music, the one thing that always made him feel at home. Backstage at the competition, the boy saw other participants practicing. They were older, more experienced, and had fancy instruments. Some of them looked confident and even a little arrogant. The boy felt a small pang of doubt. Could he really compete with them? But then he remembered his past performances and the joy of sharing music. He took a deep breath and reminded himself that talent came from practice, dedication, and heart, not appearances. When it was finally his turn, he walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, and the audience was much larger than he had ever seen. Some people whispered when they saw him, noticing his simple clothes and quiet demeanor. But the boy did not let it bother him. He sat at the piano, feeling the cool keys under his fingers, and closed his eyes. In that moment, all the fear disappeared. It was just him and the music. The first notes were soft and gentle, carrying a story that only he could tell. The audience leaned in, surprised by the depth and skill of his playing. The boy's fingers moved quickly and smoothly, hitting every note with precision and emotion. The music seemed to flow naturally from him, as if the piano had always been an extension of his soul. He could feel the audience listening, but he didn't let that distract him. He was lost in the melody, and it was beautiful. As he continued, the music grew more complex. He played faster, more dynamically, yet every note was clear and full of emotion. The audience was captivated, some closing their eyes to feel the music fully, while others leaned forward in amazement. The boy was no longer just a participant. He was a storyteller, sharing his life, his struggles, and his dreams through the piano. Each chord was a word, each melody a sentence, and the story he told was moving hearts. Halfway through the piece, the boy faced a challenging section. His fingers hesitated for a brief moment, and he could hear a faint gasp from the audience. But instead of panicking, he focused even harder. He remembered all the practice, all the long hours, and all the dreams he had carried. With renewed determination, he played the section flawlessly, and the audience erupted into applause. He smiled quietly to himself, feeling a mix of relief and pride. He knew he had conquered both the music and his fear. As the final notes rang out, the boy held his hands above the keys and let them rest. There was a moment of silence, and then the applause grew louder, filling the hall with cheers. The boy looked at the faces in the audience, seeing amazement and admiration. Some people were on their feet, clapping and cheering. He had done it. He had shown everyone, including himself, that he was capable of great things. The music had spoken for him, and it had been heard loud and clear. After the performance, judges and audience members approached him, praising his talent and dedication. Some offered opportunities for further lessons, scholarships, and invitations to perform at other events. The boy listened politely, feeling grateful but humble. He knew that this was just another step in his journey, not the final destination. He had learned that talent, hard work, and passion could open doors, even for someone from a small, humble home. That evening, after returning to his small room in the city, the boy sat by a window and thought about everything that had happened. The lights, the applause, and the music. All of it felt like a dream, but he knew it was real, and he knew that he could achieve even more. He picked up his notebook and began writing a new piece, inspired by the city, the audience, and the feeling of performing on such a big stage. The music flowed naturally, just as it always had. The boy realized that the world was bigger than he had ever imagined, and his music could take him to places he had never been. He also understood that challenges would continue to come, that some people might doubt him and that fear could return. But he was ready to face all of it. He had learned that courage, dedication, and a love for what he did could overcome any obstacle. As he played into the night, the boy felt a sense of peace and purpose. Music was no longer just a hobby, a pastime, or an escape. It was his voice, his story, and his way of connecting with the world. He had come a long way from the small streets and old house he had always known, and he knew that this was just the beginning. There were more stages, more audiences, and more dreams waiting for him. The boy smiled, feeling ready for whatever came next, ready to share his music with the world, and ready to continue a journey that had already changed his life forever. The boy had returned home from the city competition with a heart full of excitement and new dreams. He had played in front of a larger audience than ever before and had felt the thrill of applause that made his heart soar. But even with all the praise and recognition, he knew that the journey was far from over. There was still so much to learn, so much to experience, and so many stages waiting for him. The boy felt a mix of hope and determination as he sat by his old keyboard, playing softly to himself, dreaming of the future. In the weeks after the competition, invitations to perform at small events began to arrive. Local community centers, school gatherings, and even some town festivals wanted to hear him play. Each time he performed, the audience was amazed by his talent, and slowly, the boy began to feel more comfortable with attention. However, with every performance came a little more pressure. People expected him to be perfect every time, and sometimes he worried that he would let them down. Still, the joy of playing and connecting with people through music outweighed any fear. One afternoon, a letter arrived that would change everything. It was an invitation to participate in a national-level music competition. The competition would gather the most talented young pianists from all over the country. The winner would not only receive a scholarship, but also an opportunity to perform in front of a world-renowned audience. The boy's hands trembled as he read the letter. The chance was extraordinary, but the thought of competing with so many gifted players filled him with both excitement and nervousness. He knew this was a challenge unlike any he had faced before. His family was thrilled for him, but they also felt concerned. The competition would be held in a faraway city, and the boy would need to travel alone with the help of his teacher. They encouraged him to take the opportunity, reminding him that talent like his deserved to be seen and celebrated. The boy promised them that he would do his best, carrying both their love and support with him as he prepared for the journey ahead. The weeks leading up to the competition were filled with tireless practice. The boy spent hours at his music club, learning new techniques and refining his skills. His teacher pushed him gently, asking him to try pieces that were more complex and challenging than anything he had attempted before. At home, he returned to his old keyboard, practicing late into the night, sometimes falling asleep with his fingers still resting on the keys. The music became a part of him, like breathing or thinking, and he poured all his heart into every note he played. The day of the national competition arrived. The boy traveled to the city with his teacher, both excited and nervous. The venue was enormous, with a grand stage and a large audience waiting. As they entered the hall, the boy's eyes widened. This was bigger than anything he had ever imagined. Other participants were warming up, many with beautiful, new instruments and elegant attire. Some looked confident and proud, while others seemed as nervous as he felt. The boy held his music notebook tightly and reminded himself that what mattered most was the music, not appearances or judgments. Backstage, the atmosphere was intense. Contestants whispered among themselves, practiced, and prepared. The boy felt a flutter of nerves in his chest, but he focused on his breathing, imagining the keys beneath his fingers and the music flowing through him. His teacher offered calm words of encouragement. "Remember, the stage is yours. Let the music speak, and the rest will follow." The boy nodded, feeling a mixture of reassurance and determination. Finally, it was his turn. The boy walked onto the stage, feeling the bright lights on his face and hearing the murmurs of the audience. Some people looked skeptical when they saw his simple clothes and quiet demeanor, but he did not let it shake him. He sat at the piano, placed his fingers on the keys, and closed his eyes. In that moment, nothing else existed. It was just him and the music. The first notes were delicate and soft, carrying emotion and depth. The audience listened in silence, drawn to the story the boy was telling through his music. Each chord was precise, each melody flowing naturally. His fingers moved with skill and grace, touching the piano in a way that seemed almost magical. The audience leaned forward, captivated by the sound. Some closed their eyes to feel it fully, while others exchanged glances, amazed at the talent before them. As the performance continued, the music grew more powerful and intricate. The boy played with confidence, allowing the audience to feel every emotion: joy, sorrow, hope, and wonder. His fingers danced across the keys, executing difficult passages with ease. The audience could sense the dedication and passion behind every note. Even the judges, known for being strict and serious, were visibly impressed by the boy's performance. He had captured their attention and admiration without even trying to impress. It was simply the music that spoke. Halfway through the piece, a particularly challenging section arrived. The boy's fingers moved quickly over the keys, maintaining both speed and accuracy. For a brief moment, there was tension in the room as the notes became complex, but the boy remained calm. He remembered all the practice, the long nights, and the encouragement of his teacher and family. With a deep breath, he played the section flawlessly, and the audience erupted into quiet applause, followed by stunned silence. He smiled inwardly, knowing he had overcome the challenge. As he reached the final notes, the boy poured all his emotion into the music. Every chord, every melody, every pause was filled with meaning. The audience was spellbound, completely absorbed in the performance. When the last note echoed through the hall, there was a moment of silence, as if everyone were holding their breath. Then, the applause began, gradually building into a thunderous cheer. People stood up, clapping and shouting, some wiping tears from their eyes. The boy had not just played the piano. He had touched hearts, leaving everyone in awe. After stepping off the stage, the boy was approached by judges, audience members, and fellow participants. Everyone wanted to congratulate him, ask about his techniques, and know more about the young pianist who had delivered such an extraordinary performance. Some offered lessons, scholarships, and invitations to prestigious music schools. The boy listened politely, feeling grateful but humble. He knew that this was only one moment in a long journey. The experience had taught him that talent, dedication, and heart could break through any barrier. That night, back in his small hotel room, the boy sat by the window and reflected on everything that had happened. The city lights shone brightly, but his thoughts were on the music and the journey he had taken to reach this point. He picked up his notebook and began writing a new piece, inspired by the competition, the audience, and the emotions he had experienced. The music flowed effortlessly, a reminder that his heart and his fingers were connected in a way that nothing else could break. The boy understood that challenges would continue, that fear and doubt would appear again, and that every stage would bring its own difficulties. But he also knew that music was his strength, his voice, and his way to connect with people. No matter where he came from, what he wore, or what others thought, his talent and passion could shine through. He felt a deep sense of purpose, knowing that the world was wide and full of opportunities for someone who dared to dream. As he played into the night, the boy smiled, feeling a sense of peace and determination. The music was not just sound. It was his story, his life, and his hope for the future. He had faced one of the biggest challenges of his life and had succeeded beyond what he ever imagined. And he knew that this was only the beginning. There would be more stages, more audiences, and more dreams to chase. The boy was ready, and he would continue to play, inspire, and share his music with the world, one note at a time. After the national competition, the boy's life began to change in ways he had never imagined. He was no longer just the quiet child from a small house. He was becoming known as a young piano prodigy. People from different towns started recognizing him, and invitations to perform at bigger events came more frequently. The boy felt a mixture of excitement and pressure. He loved sharing his music, but he also felt responsible to live up to the growing expectations. Each performance had to be better than the last, and sometimes that thought made him nervous. One morning, he received an invitation that made his heart race. A famous music academy in the capital city had noticed his talent and wanted him to perform at a special gala. This was not just a competition. It was a showcase of the best young talents in the country, attended by renowned musicians, critics, and even media reporters. The boy felt a mix of awe and fear. He had never performed in front of such a large and distinguished audience. But deep down, he knew he could not miss this opportunity. He wanted to show the world the music that had always lived in his heart. The weeks leading up to the gala were intense. The boy practiced for hours each day, focusing on both technical skill and emotional expression. His teacher worked closely with him, helping him refine every piece, every note, and every pause. The boy also spent time composing a new piece, inspired by his journey from a small, humble home to performing on national stages. The composition was personal, full of emotions he could not express in words but could pour into the music. When the day of the gala arrived, the boy traveled to the capital city with his teacher. The city was larger and busier than any place he had ever seen. The streets were crowded, the buildings tall, and the lights bright. Despite feeling overwhelmed, he focused on the music and the purpose of his performance. This was a chance to show the world who he was, not just a poor boy with worn clothes, but a talented musician with a story to tell. Backstage at the gala, the boy saw other participants preparing. They were confident, some with elegant attire and shining instruments. He felt a small pang of doubt, but then he remembered all the performances that had led him here. He thought about the first time he had played on stage and the joy he felt when the audience truly listened. He took a deep breath and reminded himself that music was his voice, and it had always spoken louder than fear. When it was finally his turn, he walked onto the grand stage. The lights were bright, and the audience was enormous. People whispered as they noticed his simple clothes, underestimating him once again. The boy did not let this distract him. He sat at the piano, placed his fingers on the keys, and closed his eyes. Everything else faded away. It was just him and the music. The first notes were soft and delicate, immediately capturing the attention of the audience. Each chord carried emotion. Each melody told a story. The boy played with confidence and skill, letting the music flow naturally from his heart. The audience was captivated. People leaned forward, amazed by the young pianist who could fill such a large hall with emotion. The boy's fingers moved with precision and grace, each note clear and expressive. As the performance continued, the music grew more complex and powerful. The boy played with a mix of technical mastery and emotional depth. His new composition, inspired by his life journey, was filled with highs and lows, quiet moments and dramatic crescendos. The audience felt every emotion, connecting with the story he was telling. Even the critics and seasoned musicians in attendance were visibly moved. The boy was no longer just performing. He was sharing a piece of his soul. Halfway through the performance, the music reached its most challenging section. The boy's fingers moved rapidly across the keys, executing difficult sequences with precision. For a moment, there was tension in the hall, as everyone wondered if he could maintain the complexity of the piece. But the boy remained calm, trusting in his practice and his connection to the music. He played flawlessly, and the audience erupted into quiet gasps of amazement. He had conquered the challenge, turning it into one of the most memorable moments of the performance. As he approached the final notes, the boy poured every ounce of emotion he had into the music. The melody swelled, building to a powerful climax, then softened gently into a delicate finish. The audience was spellbound. When the last note lingered in the air, there was a moment of silence, as if everyone was holding their breath. Then, the hall erupted in thunderous applause. People stood, cheering, clapping, and some even wiped tears from their eyes. The boy had done it. He had shared not just music, but his story, and it had touched everyone present. After the performance, the boy was approached by musicians, critics, and event organizers. They praised his skill, creativity, and emotional depth. Some offered him scholarships, invitations to perform internationally, and opportunities to study with world-class teachers. The boy listened humbly, grateful for every kind word and opportunity. He understood that this recognition was a result of his hard work, dedication, and love for music. He knew he had much more to learn, but he also knew he had already achieved something remarkable. That night, back in his hotel room, the boy sat by the window and reflected on his journey. From the small streets and humble home he had known, to the stages of his town, to the national gala, he had come a long way. He picked up his notebook and began composing a new piece, inspired by the emotions of the day, the applause, and the feeling of being understood through music. The notes flowed effortlessly, a reminder that music was not just a skill, but a language that could express what words could not. The boy realized that success was not just about recognition or applause. It was about the connection he could make through music, the emotions he could share, and the stories he could tell. He had learned that talent and hard work could open doors, but passion and heart could touch souls. He understood that his journey was just beginning, that there would be more challenges, more stages, and more opportunities to grow. As he played late into the night, the boy felt a deep sense of peace and purpose. Music was no longer just his escape or his hobby. It was his identity, his voice, and his way of inspiring others. He had faced fear, doubt, and countless challenges, yet he had persevered. And he knew that no matter what lay ahead, his music would guide him, carry him, and allow him to share his story with the world. The boy went to sleep that night with a heart full of hope and determination. He dreamed not of fame or wealth, but of music, of touching hearts, and of continuing the journey that had already transformed his life. He had faced his biggest challenge yet and emerged stronger, wiser, and more inspired than ever. And he knew that the next stage, the next audience, and the next dream were waiting for him, ready to hear the music that had always lived within his soul. After the gala performance in the capital city, the boy returned home, but things were different now. The streets and small houses he had always known felt familiar, yet he felt changed inside. He had been recognized, praised, and even admired by people he had never imagined noticing him. The applause, the cheers, and the admiration had left a mark on his heart. But more than that, he had discovered something important. His music had the power to inspire and connect with others. That realization filled him with a quiet confidence. Life at home continued in its simple ways. The house was still old, the paint still peeling, and the streets still narrow, but the boy no longer felt limited by them. He continued to practice on his old keyboard and sometimes on borrowed pianos at the music club. Every note he played reminded him of how far he had come. Even small things, like the chirping of birds in the morning or the sound of rain tapping on the roof, inspired new melodies. He knew that his environment did not define his potential. his passion and dedication did. The invitations kept coming. Community events, local festivals, and even schools wanted him to perform. The boy accepted most of them not for recognition, but because he wanted to share his music. With each performance, he grew more confident and more comfortable in front of audiences of all sizes. The fear and hesitation that once followed him backstage had mostly disappeared. Now, when he played, he felt free and alive, lost in the joy of creating something beautiful. One day, a letter arrived from an international music festival. The festival organizers had heard about the boy's performances and wanted him to play alongside some of the best young pianists from around the world. The boy felt nervous and excited. Traveling abroad, performing on an international stage, and sharing music with a global audience was a dream he had never dared to imagine. But deep down, he knew that he had worked for this moment his whole life. His fingers, heart, and mind were ready. The preparations for the international festival were intense. The boy's teacher helped him select a repertoire that would show both his technical skill and emotional depth. He practiced tirelessly, refining each piece, adding subtle expressions, and working on transitions that would make the performance seamless. Every day he pushed himself a little further, remembering the lessons learned from every stage he had played on. The boy understood that the journey to greatness was not about shortcuts but about dedication, patience, and love for the music. When the day arrived, the boy traveled to the festival city. It was larger and busier than any place he had been before. Towering buildings, crowded streets, and bright lights surrounded him. But he focused on the music, the only thing that truly mattered. Backstage at the festival, he saw other participants practicing. Many had elegant instruments, sophisticated attire, and years of formal training. Some looked confident, others nervous. The boy reminded himself that his journey had been unique, and that his music was shaped by his heart and experiences, not by appearances or pedigree. Finally, it was his turn to perform. He walked onto the grand stage, feeling the bright lights on his face and hearing the hum of the audience. Some people whispered when they saw his simple clothes, underestimating him as they often had. But the boy did not let it affect him. He sat at the piano, placed his fingers on the keys, and closed his eyes. For a moment the world disappeared. It was only him and the music, and everything else faded away. The first notes were gentle and deliberate, carrying a story that resonated deeply with the audience. Each chord and melody expressed emotion, telling a tale of struggle, hope, and determination. The audience was captivated, leaning in, holding their breath, and allowing the music to wash over them. The boy's fingers moved with grace and precision, every note perfect yet full of feeling. It was as if the piano had become a voice for his soul, speaking words that could not be said aloud. As the performance progressed, the music grew more complex, with rapid passages and powerful crescendos. The boy played with confidence and mastery, never missing a note and conveying every emotion with authenticity. The audience was silent, fully absorbed in the performance. Some closed their eyes to feel the music, while others whispered to their neighbors in awe. The boy had become a storyteller, using the piano to share the journey of his life in a way that words could not capture. Midway through the piece, the most difficult section arrived. The notes were fast and demanding, requiring skill and focus. For a brief moment, the audience held its breath, sensing the challenge. But the boy remained calm, trusting in his training and experience. He executed the section flawlessly, impressing everyone with both his technical ability and emotional interpretation. The audience erupted into quiet gasps, then returned to silent admiration as the music continued, each note more beautiful than the last. As he approached the final notes, the boy poured every ounce of emotion into the music. The melody soared, building to a powerful climax, then softened into a gentle, delicate finish. The audience was spellbound. When the last note lingered in the air, there was a moment of complete silence, as if time itself had paused. Then, the hall erupted in applause. People rose to their feet, cheering, clapping, and some even wiping away tears. The boy had done more than perform. He had moved hearts, and everyone present understood the depth of his talent and the story behind it. After the performance, musicians, critics, and audience members approached him, offering praise, scholarships, and opportunities to perform internationally. The boy listened humbly, feeling grateful for every word and gesture. He knew that his journey had taken him from a small, humble home to the world stage, and that his dedication and passion had made it possible. He also understood that this was not the end, but a beginning of a larger journey that would continue to unfold. That night, back in his hotel room, the boy reflected on everything he had experienced. From the small streets of his hometown to local competitions, national recognition, and now an international stage, his journey had been incredible. He picked up his notebook and began writing a new composition, inspired by his travels, performances, and the emotions he had felt. The notes flowed effortlessly, reminding him that music was not just sound but a language that could connect souls across the world. The boy realized that his story was not only about talent or recognition. It was about courage, perseverance, and believing in oneself despite challenges. He had faced doubt, fear, and the judgments of others, but he had overcome them with dedication and heart. Music had given him a voice, a purpose, and a way to touch people's lives. He understood that true success was not measured by applause or awards but by the ability to inspire and move others. As he played late into the night, the boy felt a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. Music had transformed his life, opening doors and hearts that he had never imagined. He had grown not only as a musician but also as a person, learning the value of hard work, resilience, and passion. He knew that more challenges and stages would come, but he was ready. His heart and his music would guide him through whatever lay ahead. The boy went to sleep that night with dreams full of melodies, stages, and audiences around the world. He dreamed of sharing his music, inspiring others, and continuing the journey that had already changed his life. From the small, humble home he had once known to the grand stages of the world, he had proven that talent, dedication, and heart could overcome any obstacle. And he knew that no matter what the future held, he would continue to play, to create, and to share his music, touching hearts one note at a time. The journey had begun with a single melody, and now it would continue, limitless, bright, and full of promise.